Okay, for the Chapter 5 project builder, let's go ahead and look at the finished product before we actually figure out how to build it. So as you can see, this is the animation that was created for Chapter 4. And as we go to the Cruises button, we have our ship that moves, but now instead of saying Galapagos, we have a Mystery Locale button. When we click it, we hear a Foghorn Sound and we see a Searchlight Mask, which is kind of an advanced animation feature in Flash. And what that does is it reveals different destinations. In the book, it's actually different mystery ships, but I think it's more appropriate to have mystery destinations for cruises. And in mine, I've added a couple of extra design details and I've made my own lighthouse, etc. But this is the basics of how your project should work. So let's go ahead and see a project that's about halfway through. And as we look at this, we have a whole new folder that has mystery page layers. And in this, we have our backdrop layer, which is this gray background. We have the 3 different locations, which are these images right here. We have the searchlight, and this has been converted to a movie clip, and that's going to allow us to animate it. Then we have the Foghorn Sound, or at least a layer for it, and we'll add that at the end of the video. And then we just have the lighthouse and the heading, which just sit there. So what we need to do is we first need to animate the searchlight the way we want it to be animated. And again, it needs to be a movie clip in order for this to work correctly. So what I want to have it do is I want to have it move from the left to the right. Now, I could rotate it right here, but it's going to get kind of weird because my anchor point is sitting in the center and it's going to rotate around that point. So what I can do is when I click the transform tool, I'm going to go ahead and move the anchor point to the end of the searchlight. And so when it rotates, it's going to rotate around that corner. So the first thing we need to do after we do that is I'll go ahead and click on that searchlight and I'm going to do Insert Motion Tween. And it may be, no, the anchor point is still there, so we're good. So I will go ahead and move to the end of that animation and I will rotate that searchlight to our final destination. So as we scrub the playhead, that's what it's going to look like. Now, as you saw with my final example, I did have it kind of going back and forth, and then it finally lands on the last destination. So once you have the animation exactly the way you want it, then what you can do is you can copy this tween and copy this layer. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and right click and duplicate this layer. And the duplicated layer is going to become our mask. So I'll go ahead and double click here and type Searchlight Mask. So this is when it gets a little bit tricky. The reason why we did that is so that the animation and the shape is exactly perfectly the same. So I'll put my searchlight underneath my locations, and then the Searchlight Mask should be right above the locations. So when I click on that Searchlight Mask, if I go to, let's see, Modify Timeline Layer Properties, this is where I can make sure it's a locked layer, because even if you've done everything correct, if your layer isn't locked, then the mask won't work. And I'll make sure it knows it's a masked layer, or the mask layer. So it gets this weird little kind of teal symbol, and you can barely see it, but that's a little mask. But it needs to know what it's going to mask, and it's going to mask the 3 locations. So you could go up to Modify Timeline Layer Properties, lock, and say it's masked. Click OK, or you could just drag it, and it kind of gets this weird little line that's telling you where it's going, and this shows me it's underneath that. And then when they turn green like that, then that is showing you that they are masked, and again, they have to be locked. So now as we move through it, now we're seeing the masked items show up only when the searchlight covers them. And the reason why we can still see this searchlight is because we're seeing this searchlight here. The mask actually becomes invisible because it's just kind of cutting a hole in that layer, and as that hole moves around on the layer, we can see the things that are underneath it. So that's how we create the mask. Now you can get a little bit more fancy with your animation like I did, where I go back and forth and back and forth. But make sure if you do that you do it with the original Searchlight and then copy the layer, because you want to make sure that the animation and the position of the thing you're animating are exactly the same. So once you have that animation going, then you're going to want to add a Foghorn Sound, and you should be able to get this from the assets.fla. So I'll go ahead in my library and it has the assets.fla, and I'll throw the Foghorn Sound, and it kind of shows up a little bit there. And make sure you're selecting this layer before you actually insert that. So I'll go back to my chapter 5, and I'm going to go ahead and move that to my sounds folder just to keep it organized. So this sound, when it plays, is insanely loud, and it'll almost actually break your speakers on your computer. So we don't want that to happen. So by clicking on the wavelength in the actual layer, we'll go to the properties panel, and in here we have an effect option, and we're going to choose custom. And this is going to allow us to change the volume level on the left and right channel. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it all the way down because it's that loud that we really need to go all the way down, and click OK. And then it shouldn't be crazy loud. So beyond that, the rest that you should be able to do on your own is you have a button saying mystery locale, and this is going to jump us to the start of the mystery animation. And if I double click inside this button, you'll see the up, over, down, and then the hit state is an actual shape, so that somebody doesn't have to precisely touch on the font. They can get anywhere near this word and it's clickable. And as we go back, it's going to ask you to create a new layer that has labels. And what a label does is it allows you to say this is the start of the mystery page. So I can go ahead and put a blank keyframe there, and I'll call this mystery page. And then instead of having, let's go back here. Instead of having this button jump to 181, I can have it jump to the frame label called mystery page. And what that does is if I end up moving this animation even further down, and let's say the mystery page starts on 290, then I don't have to keep coming back to this button and changing the actual frame number. As long as the frame label travels with the animation or the page that it goes with, then it will always jump to this little flag. So the rest of it, let's see, I don't think I'm forgetting anything, but let's go ahead and check. If we go back through here, we have the button for the mystery locale. You're going to add the frame labels for each of the pages, and you'll need to go back through all the buttons and change them from their actual page numbers. So when I come back to these buttons, I'll click on Trex, and I'll make sure instead of having a number, I'll have it jump to the label, but you have to add the labels first. And then we have the sound and the mask going, and see how it doesn't look like it's working right now? It's because these aren't locked. And then you just have to add at the very last frame, you need another layer for a home button, and that's going to jump the person back to home. So that's the basics of chapter 5, and the part that's probably going to throw you off is the mask and creating 2 searchlights. Just make sure the first one that you create and animate, you get it perfectly set where you want it to be and animated the way you want it to be. Get that all settled, and then all you have to do is right click on it and choose duplicate layer, and that's going to duplicate the content on the layer and the motion tween. So they'll be exactly the same. And the book doesn't tell you that, but that's a good shortcut and will save you a lot of time.